Al, it has been far too long since we were last in the courtroom.
It's true.
A long time.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
I should have known that was coming when I said that. I should have known.
You should have known.
God, it's you. Of course I should have known.
Always remember who you're dealing with.
My best friend.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hello, it is me.
He's the beast friend.
When did we last talk about an Ace Attorney game?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I couldn't tell you. As I mentioned, it's been a while.
It's been a while.
It happened again.
You just set yourself up for it.
I really did. When will I learn?
Never.
I would say probably never. I'm going to say it again at some point, and you're going to be like, oh, man, let me just hit you with that again.
We talked about Apollo Justice on episode 50, and then the first Ace Attorney game on episode 122.
Wow.
And then we talked about the film last year.
Wow.
I don't know if we talked about any other ones, though.
I don't think we have, because it's on our list of like potentials.
Interesting. Anyways, yes. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Season Line with Checkup OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc Owl and Ladium.
Hello.
This is episode 242. And we are talking about the first Great Ace Attorney game.
Mm-hmm.
Because those games finally came out over here.
Finally.
After 6 years.
God. I almost said it again. And I was like, wait a minute. No, I can't say it.
It took a while.
It took a while for them to come over.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But they're finally out.
Yes.
In a shocking turn of events. Because I think, like most people, we collectively thought those games aren't coming out over here. It's been so long. Why would they come out?
Yep.
And then there was just like, hey, we're putting them out as a dual pack. And I was like, huh?
Huh?
Okay, sure. I will take this.
I mean, yeah.
So there you go. So this game first originally came out on the Nintendo 3DS in Japan on July 9th, 2015. A long time ago.
Oh, it was a simpler time in 2015.
Yeah, that's true. Came to Android and iOS in Japan on August 30th, 2017. And then finally to Windows, Switch, and PS4 on July 27th, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
A long time indeed. So there you go. There's your timeline for this.
But we've only played one of them so far.
We've only played the first one. We will get to the second one at some point in time. We'll talk about it, when we finish it and all that sort of stuff. But yes, it's nice to play an Ace Attorney game again.
Yeah, man, I've missed playing it. I had such a good time when we were playing this. Like, this is super fun. I got way into it, as you're aware, but God, it was fun.
Because it's been 5 years since we've last been able to play an Ace Attorney game.
Right.
Because Spirit of Justice was 2016.
And a good
then
game.
They put out the original trilogy on basically everything, I think a couple of years ago. But outside of that, there hasn't been any new games. Even in general, there hasn't been any new games. But these are new for non-Japanese audiences, so these technically count as new games. So we got those now.
Yay.
So there is that. Let's talk about development history, and also there's a lot about localization about this game, which I think we should talk about.
Oh yeah, we definitely have to talk about it.
Because
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's dive into development first. The Greatest Attorney was developed by Capcom for the 3DS. It was directed by Shu Takumi and produced by Shintaro Kojima, and features character designs and art by Kazuya Nuri and music by Yasumasa Kitagawa and Hiromitsu Maeba. Takumi is obviously the one most people would know for directing the original trilogy, and then also went on to do Layton versus Phoenix Wright.
Mm-hmm.
And then didn't do anything, I think, with the second trilogy. Potentially. Let me double check that. Let me double check that. He was supervisor and scenario writer for Apollo Justice, and then after that, did not touch the main series.
Okay.
So there you go. Development began in 2013, a few months after the release of the Japanese release of Takumi's previous project, Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. A very underrated game, I think, that a lot of people have forgot about.
Yes, I agree.
When he was asked to work on a new Ace Attorney game. At one point, he considered having the game focus on civil trials, but remembered a game idea he had come up with earlier, around 2000. He had the idea of a mystery game in which a detective makes incorrect deductions and where players have to correct the detective and lead him towards the truth. He thought it would be fun to combine the idea with Ace Attorney, but did not expect Capcom to accept the idea. Takumi had been wanting to make a Sherlock Holmes game for a long time because of this. Holmes was part of the concept all the way from the start. According to Takumi, he had several reasons for wanting Holmes in the game, both due to the gameplay and as a way to separate the game from the main Ace Attorney series, as Holmes is from a different time period than the one the main series games takes place in. This led to Takumi thinking about how Japan was at the time and led to new possibilities for the game's mysteries. Initially, Takumi had intended for the game to begin in London, thinking that it would be too much to create a Japanese courtroom for the prologue. This changed when Nuri said that he thought it should begin in Japan. The previous work in Layton vs. Phoenix Wright helped Takumi establish the setting for the setting. It's a weird way to finish that sentence.
Yep.
Takumi found it challenging to write dialogue and using expressions appropriate for the way the Japanese language was during the Meiji period, as he had to avoid both too old-fashioned and too modern dialogue. As the Meiji period was a time when the lawyer profession was new in Japan, and when there was a lot of focus on becoming part of the new world and becoming more Western, Takumi made sure to make the game reflect this. As Takumi had to create a new world for the story to take place in, it took longer than expected to write the game's scenario. The protagonist, Ryunosuke's character, was based on how the main series protagonist, Phoenix Wright, would speak and act if he had lived during the Meiji period. When the development team wrote a list of ideas for the names for the protagonist, Ryunosuke was the first one to be suggested. It only took a few seconds for them to decide on it. Susato is based on the same concept as that of previous Ace Attorney heroines. She was designed to be a perfect partner and fun to spend time with, as the heroines of the series always are by the main character's side. Her name was decided by choosing kanji characters that Takumi found pretty. The development team decided to change Sherlock's Watson from the original, as they thought it would be more interesting if Watson weren't another English gentleman. So there is your development.
Interesting. There's a lot there.
Yes. Well, let's talk about localization, which there's even more of.
Okay.
Because there's a lot to talk about. Head localizer Janet Su? HSU?
HSU? I guess that's how it...
Approached the localization of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles primarily as a story, like all other Ace Attorney titles. For the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles in particular, there was also a need for historical and cultural background research on which to base the translation. They wanted to preserve the period feel of the setting. An example of these extra considerations is the court record subtitle system, where, in an effort to preserve the flavor of the Meiji Japan setting, she asked the programmers to create a new UI system with which she could add subtitles to pieces of evidence instead of redoing the textures in English. Regarding Japanese cultural nuances, not a lot was altered. This was because the game distinctly relied in the contrast between the cultures of Japan and Britain in its story and theming. As the player is expected to experience this culture clash in the first place, there was no need to change much. However, some instances were fine-tuned regarding their phrasing to help bring out the intended nuance of the original. Sue gives the example of a scene involving Susato Migatoba in which she talks about a decision she has made. Sue wanted to make sure that Western players understood that Susato is not being deferential or asking for permission, but is following Japanese etiquette. Sue found it difficult to translate over the game's numerous jokes and conversations that would not make sense to a Western audience. For example, a conversation between Ryunosuke and Susato about a snowman involved them talking about how something is 2 heads or 3 heads high. This had to be changed as it relied on the players being aware of the culture surrounding Daruma dolls. It would not come across as funny in English. To maintain the feel of the original while altering such lines, Sue considered what the Japanese version was going for and to either translate it over direct if possible or go for its nearest approximation. The original dialogue consists of faux Meiji-era style Japanese, which is of the period, yet which is still easy to understand for modern audiences. To replicate this, the localization has the British character speak in faux Victorian dialect, such as the blue-collar Cockney accent of Gina Lestrade. The increase in awareness of Japanese culture in recent years allowed Sue to include Japanese honorifics into the game without needing to explain what they mean. The usage of san and sama, in contrast with Mr. and Miss, was utilized in order to subtly convey to players when Ryunosuke and Susato are supposed to be speaking Japanese to each other.
That makes sense.
As the story and themes of the Great Ace Attorney is heavily tied to the protagonist being Japanese, Sue felt it was important to convey his immigrant experience. The main struggle she faced was conveying cultural information to players in a way that feels natural. This was a stark contrast to past Ace Attorney localizations in which the setting was altered to America. Sue gives the comparison of turnabout storyteller from Spirit of Justice, in which Rakugo played a major role. Sue notes that the protagonist is localized to be American. Having Japanese culture explained to her for the player's sake was easily doable and made sense. However, in contrast, it would seem entirely unnatural for Ryunosuke had to have Japanese culture explained to him. Thusly, she needed to rely on slipping the information to the player naturally via context clues and indirect dialogue. Conveying British culture to American audiences was also another hurdle that Sue faced. There were issues involving the differing terminology between British English and American English, such as first floor meaning different things in both. The Japanese original also contained many references to Victorian Britain that even the British translators did not know about and had to look up. Sue avoided using obscure Victorian-era words or hardcore Britishisms that would have been confusing to people unfamiliar with the terms. Regarding the British setting, as the Japanese original takes great care to make the London setting feel real, Sue avoided leaning on American ideas of stereotypical England and instead focused on celebrating the culture of Britain. To this extent, most of the translators who worked on the game were British, and the translation was handled by Plus Alpha Translations. The inclusion of real-life figure Sosuke Natsume caused another hurdle for Sue. As Natsume would be recognizable to all Japanese players, his books being required learning at school, the character relied a great deal on a natural cultural warmth towards him. It was difficult making the character as lovable to an audience who would likely not know who he is. Prior to the announcement of the game's Western localization, fears over the game's usage of racism was one of the speculated reasons for the lack of a Western release. In actual fact, the localization did tone back on the racism included in the dialogue and removed all outright Asian slurs.
This is toned back?
Yeah.
Whoa!
Notable examples include insults about Ryunosuke being yellow, being altered to him being insulted as black on account of his black university uniform, and all usages of Oriental were removed and replaced with Nipponese or Far Eastern. So it was worse.
How? Oh my god, I don't know how you could possibly get worse, because that's what I was hoping we were going to talk about when we were talking about localizations. Like, this is basically just racism the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, holy crap, everybody's so racist in this. And, like, I cannot imagine it being at another level of racist.
Yeah.
God.
I guess I'm thinking that if, like, they had gone full bore with it,
yeah,
you probably would have bumped the rating up.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Because I'm assuming the ESRB would be like, look at these and be like, you can't put slurs in there and not get an M rating.
Right. Like, that's just racist, guys. Come on.
That's at least my thought on it. And also just like, probably at the same time just be like, we should just probably tone this back in general because whoo boy.
Yeah, like that would make me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Finally, due to long-standing copyright issues related to the character of Holmes with the estate of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the character of Sherlock was renamed Sherlock Sholmes for the international release. This was done in allusion to Maurice Leblanc's Arsène Lupin vs. Sherlock Sholmes, according to Takumi. Following the announcement of the Sherlock Sholmes localization, memes developed around the character and the circumstances of their renaming from Sherlock Holmes in conjunction with copyright law. The situation was picked up and conveyed by major online news outlets. So there you go. Also, we just compared it to the Code Realize version. So I guess if you're unaware, the estate of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, basically some of Sherlock Holmes is in what's the public
domain.
Public domain. The other half of the stories are not,
mm-hmm.
and the other half of the stories are the ones where like Holmes expresses emotions, and they have those locked down with like under like lock and key essentially, where you can't do anything with those.
Yep.
So basically a lot of stories that involve Sherlock Holmes and doing anything that's not just straightforward detective work has to get changed because they will just come down on you because they're just yes.
Yeah, they're terrible. Fight me, guys. But seriously, like, the first thing that came to mind when we heard about it, we were just like, oh man, Code Realize, that's what it is. Yay!
Mm-hmm.
Except for in that one, it's pronounced Sherlock Sholmes.
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, oh, this is French, ha ha ha.
And then they just go ahead and, well, it's spoilers for Code Realize. They just go ahead and be like, by the way, this is actually Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, the biggest twist ever. Who would have expected him to be Sherlock Holmes?
Because I doubt the Doyle estate is going through and playing all of Code Realize to get to that point.
I mean, honestly, that's the real mistake.
Yes.
They should. Maybe they would be less terrible if they actually played Code Realize. Because then maybe they would have some happiness in their lives. I don't know.
Doubt it.
I mean, yeah. Rip.
So there you go. Also, it is worth noting that there was a fan translation of this game that came out in 2019.
Oh.
I've had it bookmarked on my computer for probably since then.
Mm-hmm.
And just never got around to playing it. Because I didn't know if like 3DS emulation would even work on my computer.
Right.
But that has been a thing. So like this first game has been playable in some form for at least a couple years, but this is the first official release. So
I did not realize that it had a fan translation.
yes, I don't know if the second game got one or not, but yes. Also because of the as we talked about the racism in this game, which is a lot.
It's a lot.
There is a part about this on the Wikipedia in terms of the reviews about this game.
About the racism?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Western reviews made note of the excessive usage of casual anti-Asian racism towards the Japanese characters within the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. The usage of such racism has been subject to both praise and criticism. Ash Parrish of Kotaku said the excessive use of racism made her uncomfortable and called it shockingly upsetting. The saving grace that stopped her from turning off the game was both Sholmes and Wilson never engaged in any of the racism. Karen Pradden of First Post said the dialogue is damaged by extremely tone-deaf use of racist discourse, specifically pointing out to the excessive usage of the term Nipponese and the accusations made against Ryunosuke that he is an Eastern sorcerer. So there's that. But then there's also this. It says, on the other hand, Kate Gray of Nintendo Life said it makes for honest, raw portrayal of how things were in the late 19th century. Melindy Hetfield at Eurogamer noted that the game's use of casual, smarmy racism ties into the game's overall themes of the Japanese wanting to reject Western customs in favor of maintaining their cultural identity. Amelia Fruzzetti at Nintendo Wire said that while the racism left a questionable taste in her mouth and felt out of place for an Ace Attorney game, it was nevertheless period appropriate and handled as delicately as possible. Reviewer Elliot Gattaca considered the casual xenophobia and racism to be a positive thing and a means in which to get people to open up about such issues and push against them. He stated that it is a bad thing to just consider the game problematic. Andrew Webster of The Verge was pleasantly surprised that the game touched upon the issues of racism and sexism of the time period. Likewise, reviewer Akshay Bala considered the decision to include casual racism a bold move. Insights magazine stated that the racist treatment that he endures helps to make Ryunosuke's victories all the more satisfying.
I mean, I'm more in the camp of like, it was appalling and we both talked about how like upsetting it was, but I mean, it is period appropriate. That's something that they would be doing. And I do find it nice that like our allies didn't do that. But yeah, it is a very heavy racist game. I mean, like, and I mean, keeping in mind, like, this is a Japanese developer making a game that like probably had some of this to begin with in there, and or most likely had, well, you said it had it even worse. That's them in and of itself making a statement.
Yeah.
So I mean, that means something, and I think it's kind of weird to like just discount it as like, oh no, this is just racist and bad. Like, it is racist and bad, but I think that them putting it in there purposefully is significant in and of itself.
Like, they're putting it in there for a reason.
Right. It's not just like, oh, let's be casually racist. This is funny. Ha ha ha.
Like, I think overall it kind of ties into like this whole notion that, you know, Britain around this time period of the late 19th century is still very feeling that they're high and mighty and that they can do whatever they want, you know, colonialism, all that sort of stuff. So like, it also ties into like that notion that like they are very arrogant and they just don't care about other people or races or anything like that. So they will just say casual xenophobic and racist comments and just general talk and feel like, oh, you know, what's the big deal?
Yeah, like that. This is how it is.
Yeah.
It's like it was upsetting, but it wasn't enough that I was like, oh God, I can't play this game.
Right. I was like more shocked that like I was like, oh wow, they're really going for this.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think like you said, like I was like, or I realized like, yes, this is very period appropriate for the time. This is how people would speak, especially to, you know, people from other countries that they don't understand and don't know, and just like, oh, I've only heard these stereotypes, so this has to be true.
Right.
And also, like, considering how much class warfare is in this game as well, like it's just it's a whole bunch of stuff wrapped up together to like how late 19th century Britain was.
Yep.
That like I don't think you can just cherry pick one thing and be like, well, this is bad, when it's also doing all this other stuff that's like critiquing this time period.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree with you. And I think that
I
it
don't know,
actually
2 cents.
does a pretty good job of being like a critique of the time period.
Mm-hmm.
I like I said, I cannot imagine it being more racist than it already is because Jesus Christ, it was everywhere.
But apparently it was.
Wow. Like literally multiple times. It's like, all right, we get it. You don't like Asians. Let's move on. Like, oof. Oof. Just let me be an attorney. They didn't want to let me be an attorney, but
No, they really didn't.
I sure did show them because I became an attorney.
Yeah.
Actually, on a side note, you're talking about the like feeling of superiority and looking down on the Japanese, etc. Like, I think the first case of this game is a really good way to ground that entire mindset that you have throughout the rest of the game. Like, they did a really, really good job of setting that up by just having that first case.
But yeah, I would agree with that as well, because they're very like adamant, but like, oh man, we just got this new treaty with Britain and everything. Man, we're feeling all great and everything. People are recognizing us as a country. Like, this is great. Also, we really don't want to make them mad because they will cut us off immediately, and that'll be real bad.
Well, and then the situation with how it ends is also a whole show.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a whole mess all around.
It's a huge mess in every step of the way, and I mean they're also willing to just like scapegoat somebody to make them happy, and it's crazy. But I think that was a really good way to set all that up of like, this is what you're going to be dealing with, is people thinking like you're inferior the whole time you're playing this.
And also just setting up like immediately, like, this is a very political game.
Yes. Yes.
So like, yeah, like looking through this game now and like just comparing to like when this game came out in 2015, like there's no way they would have put this out.
No.
Just with the idea of like, where the Ace Attorney series was at that point, where like they weren't doing anything to like maintain that, oh yeah, these games are from Japan, like they take place in Japan, I should say.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. They didn't want to touch that. And also just with like how much, like we said, casual racism, how much like politics is in this game, like it makes a lot of sense why they would have been like, no, we can't touch this.
It would have been a much harder sell to get it out then.
It would have been. But I think like now it's like it's more easy to understand. Because like I think people who play these games know like, yes, the weird localizations of the original games is a thing.
Yep.
We know like what these games are supposed to be and everything. So like, making this a game about like a character from Japan and everything, like it's fine. People are going to understand that. But also, like, there's no way you could change that and make this game even, like, remotely playable.
No. And I mean, honestly, like, it's not that far-fetched that Phoenix would have a Japanese ancestor anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, in fact, the fact that he has an ancestor who does go to Great Britain and speaks English very, very well, like he's an English major. Like it makes sense at some point that like there would be some immigration that happens. Like you could definitely justify the fact that they have Japanifornia. You definitely could.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not completely like off the wall, like, oh God, this will never make sense. Like it totally does. If I mean, nobody ever said that Phoenix Wright was white in the games. Nobody ever said that. They just said he lived in Japanifornia. So I don't know. I think it's fine that they did that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, everybody's ancestors came from somewhere.
Mine came from the moon.
Wow, aren't you special? Mine came from Ireland. It's way less cool than the moon. Dang. Showing me up here. Showing Phoenix up too.
I try.
Man, just out here wilding.
That's me. This game also has some new gameplay mechanics that we should talk about. There is the deduction stuff with Herlock Sholmes that you get to do where he'll go through a whole thing and you have to be like, no, that's not really what happened.
Actually, let's correct everything about this.
Let's fix this real quick.
I really like that. I thought it was a clever mechanic and it was fun to do when it worked.
And then in the courtroom, it has the Leighton versus Phoenix Wright mechanic of you have multiple witnesses at the stand that you have to go through and everything. And then also there is a jury that you have to like maintain.
Or win over.
Or win over, essentially. And they are all completely stupid.
Yep. Idiots.
The most dumb people ever.
Big dumb idiots.
But everything else is basically kind of like your typical Ace Attorney fare.
Yeah, you just like find contradictions. I do appreciate that when you're doing the mechanic of there are multiple people on the stands and somebody's doing something next to somebody else, he just yells, "Excuse me." I'm like, oh man.
I also thought when it first was introduced that like you would have to constantly be looking back and forth to see like, are they doing something weird?
I was worried about that too.
But no, it just pops up like an exclamation point, like if someone's doing something weird that you need to go look at.
Yep. Yeah, I was totally worried about that too. I was like, I can't pay attention to that much stuff at once. I
think the only time it doesn't do that is in the last case.
Correct.
But even then, like that's like an outlier. So yeah. Makes things nice. Also, if you want to just play this, just watch this game, you can just do that because it has an autoplay feature, which is very wild.
It's pretty cool, actually. I mean, like, not everybody has time to play through the game and figure everything out.
Yeah.
So, it's legit.
Yeah.
I didn't use it, but, you know, I can understand why somebody would.
Absolutely.
And I also like that that's an accessibility feature of, like, somebody really wants to experience this story, but they don't really want to play the game. Like, cool, here you go. It's nice.
It's very nice. Let's talk about this here story.
Okay.
Of the game, which is going to be spoiler time.
Spoiler time. I guess before we do spoilers, I really like this game. I really like this. So we're gonna talk about spoilers, but just a heads up, like this was a very, very good game. A+, do recommend.
It's good. It does some things that you don't expect in an Ace Attorney game. Like the first like 2/3 of this game, I think you're kind of just like, huh.
Yeah, it really subverts what you would expect.
So that's fun.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a good game.
It's a good video game.
Good game.
Good game.
Which also, like, I think you can get these both for like $40, so like, it's not even full price.
Yeah.
Which is a nice bonus.
Yes.
All right, so case one.
Case one.
You're on trial for murder.
Yeah. Whoops.
There's a visiting doctor here in Japan named Dr. John H. Wilson. He got moited.
He got shot at a restaurant.
And they all think Ryunosuke did it.
Yep.
He gets represented by his best friend Kazuma Asogi.
Asogi.
And then You have to go up against the prosecutor of Takasuchi Auchi, who is the Japanese version of Winston Payne.
Yes.
And then basically, there's a dude who comes up and is like, hey, you should defend yourself and not let Kazuma defend you because he has this big trip to Great Britain coming up. And I don't want that to get messed up if he defends you.
And loses.
And loses, then that'll get taken away and everything. So you should just like defend yourself and everything.
The judge is gonna ask you a question as soon as you get up there. Just say, I do. And he's like, what? Are you asking me to like take the charges? Because I don't want to do that. He's like, no, that's not what I'm asking. It's like, well, time just get married to somebody, I guess.
Yep. Do you want to be my husband? I do.
I do.
It's like, wait, what?
We're married to the judge now.
Yay.
Yay. Legit, when he said like, oh, just say I do, I'm like, what?
All right.
Cool. But yeah, that's us saying that we are going to represent ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, to be fair, we are representing ourselves, but we do have a lot of support. So are we really completely representing ourselves? Probably not, but it's enough that we get him off that hook.
Yes.
Also, worth mentioning, his best friend has crazy, like his own wind, much like the lead singer of REO Speedwagon.
Do you not have your own wind?
I wish I had my own wind, honestly. Like if my hair could just like blow in the breeze while I'm just standing there, like it'd be so cool. But no, I do not. But his headband is just like constantly flapping, no matter where you are. And he has a sword. Wish I had a sword. I do have a sword, but it's on the wall.
Don't get a sword. You will hurt yourself.
I probably would hurt myself. Let's be real.
Would. 100%.
I would.
So basically, you go through this trial. You see some witnesses here and there, and they're very dumb. And then eventually, you have to call on like this English exchange student.
Also, there's a baby with a snot bubble.
There is a baby with a snot bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the English exchange student, she has like a swan hat, and initially she's just like only speaking English. Everyone's like, huh?
Mm-hmm. And then she gets racist.
Then she gets really racist. This is the first time that I was like, oh my God. And I swear to God, I think the waiter has tuberculosis.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like that man has tuberculosis.
He keeps coughing up blood.
Yeah, and just wiping it off like it's nothing. I'm like, oh God,
like, I'm good,
bro. You got TB. Get out of here. You're not gonna make it very much longer.
Nope.
Yikes! And then he just kind of disappears for like the back half of the game because he's not actually a waiter.
No, he's a inspector.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, huh?
What? Steals all the evidence.
Yes. But eventually you find that it was the English exchange student who moited the doctor.
Moited.
And you're like, yay, I'm acquitted and everything. What's going to happen to this lady? And they're like, well, we're going to send her to China because this is a mess between Britain and Japan. So we got to send her there, and you'll never learn about this again.
Yeah, Hong Kong has, I think they said Hong Kong has a consulate there, which Hong Kong was British at that point. So like they were like, yeah, they'll handle her there. They'll figure it out. But it's wild how racist she got. And I do think that one thing that's really cool about this case is that you gain confidence as the case goes along, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're still a rattled freaking mess, like because I think one of the first things you see is like the eyeball animation of like my eyeballs are going all over the place. But like he does gain confidence, and the first time that we got the objection, I was like, yes, yes, nailed it. That it was just our friend doing the objection. We finally got it. We got to do our objection. We're a real lawyer now.
We are a real lawyer.
Except for we're not yet.
Not really.
But we're not going to be killed for murdering somebody. We didn't do it.
Nope. We're free to go.
Yep.
Yay.
Yay. Oh, also, this is our first introduction to Suzuto. Because she shows up as like, oh, by the way, this is her research. Might be important. All right, goodbye. You guys don't want me in here because I'm a lady.
See you later.
Bye-bye. It was very helpful.
Yes. So after that, Kazuma heads off to Great Britain, but then he's like, hey, Ryunosuke, you want to come with me? He's like, yeah.
Time to stow away.
Because Kazuma keeps talking about how he wants to go to Great Britain and, learn the courts there to bring it back to Japan and kind of like, I guess, just like make the Japanese court system better than what it is now because it's still very new. But also he's mentioning like he has something he has to do over there.
Yes.
Word to the wise, you will never find out what that is.
You probably will in the second game.
I mean, yes, but also, in this game, you do not find out what it is.
You do not, yeah.
Because as soon as the second part opens up, he's dead.
He's dead. He's the victim in the case.
And everyone thinks Ryunosuke did it again.
Yep, because we were in the closet asleep.
Mm-hmm. This is also our introduction to Herlock Sholmes, because he's there as well, just making deductions here and there.
Just being a menace.
Being a menace, yes.
He's like, oh man, this guy clearly was Russian.
Everyone's like, huh?
Huh?
This is your first time you get to work with Suzuto here, as you try and figure out who killed Kazuma and everything. And this is an interesting part of the game as well, because I was like, this is going real long. Like, when are they going to disembark and go to a trial after this? Like, that seems
there's no
a
trial.
Really long part of this. But no, there's no trial. You figure out everything that happens here and get the person to confess finally, and then everyone's just like, all right, here you go.
Yep.
Head to Great Britain.
Yep.
So eventually, like, you learn that there was like this famous Russian ballerina who is basically fleeing her country. She stows away on this boat, and she inadvertently kills Kazuma because she gets scared that she thinks he's going to like rat her out.
Yeah, she thinks that she thinks that he's going to alert the captain about everything. But what he was actually doing was he was going to go consult with Ryunosuke and ask like, hey, what should I do here? And she pushed him and he died. Your brother Fred died.
and then she's like, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I can't
My bad.
I do think it was kind of clever how they used like an actual Sherlock Holmes thing here, the speckled band. I thought that was pretty clever because it really did like throw me off for a bit. It's like, but it wasn't related at all.
Nope. So there you go. And then also afterwards, they're like, well, I guess you guys got to go back to Japan now. But then Ryunosuke's like, what if I study law and just take the spot?
All that was asked for was one lawyer and one assistant, and we still have one assistant. So if I become a lawyer, then, we're still meeting the deal. It's fine.
It's fine.
Plus, I got to figure out what he wanted to do.
We won't, though, at least in this game.
No.
I guess we should say there's quite a few things that are definitely are interesting because they definitely leave a lot of plot holes.
Yeah.
Where I guess at the time you'd have to be like, man, I hope they really make a sequel to this game.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because there's a lot of just specific things here and there that just do not get answered.
No.
And there's one of the special videos that are on the game where it's Phoenix versus Ryunosuke, and he very much specifically addresses yo, there was a lot of stuff you didn't address in that first game, huh? They're like, oh, I mean, yeah, I guess, sorry. So yeah, they head to Britain. They have to meet up with the Lord Chief Justice Mael Strongheart, who's a weird dude who's
obsessed with being on time for everything,
and he loves clocks.
I mean, he's a weirdo.
Very much a weirdo.
I like to be on time, but I'm not like that.
He basically agrees to the terms that Ryunosuke and Susanoo give him of hey, just take me. But he's like, all right, well, you got to go defend this guy who's going to be is accused of murder, and if you don't defend him, he's going to be murdered. He's going to get
Executed.
executed. Yes.
He's like, basically, this is your test to see if you actually know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually did all the studying you said you did, go defend this guy who doesn't have, like, no one will defend him. And if he loses, then he will be executed. Have
Yes.
fun, kids.
So they have to go defend this guy who is a alleged philanthropist.
Philanthropist.
Yes, Magnus McGilded. And he has been accused of murdering a bricklayer in a bus.
In a bus.
We also meet our prosecutor throughout the game, Barrick von Zeeks. He's known as the Reaper of the Old Bailey.
And also very racist.
Very racist and just angry all the time.
Yeah, and very wine drinky.
Yes. Also, we get introduced to like the other court mechanics of like the jury and everything.
Yep.
This case is very weird because it's all just like everything is not as it seems, I guess you should say.
This was a very clever case, and this is like the case before this was different, that like we didn't have the trial. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. We don't have a trial. But then this one really shows us like you're dealing with a different kind of game here.
Mm-hmm.
And it really subverted my expectations for what I was getting into. And I was like, oh, that's really good. Actually, a very clever thing. Because I was so proud of myself. Like when I was figuring everything, you always feel proud of yourself when you start figuring the things out in like an Ace Attorney game. And like I was very proud of myself. I was figuring it out, and then it's like, oh no, what have I done?
But there's also like you would figure something out, and then Ryunosuke would be like, I don't have a good feeling about this, and I'm just like, So essentially, like you come up with this whole case, and then like another witness comes up and kind of corroborates it. But at the end, Van Zeeks is like, yo, I think this evidence has been tampered with. Like, there was blood in that bus, but that blood was never discovered by the police and anything. That seems real weird. But they're unable to prove that, like, oh, yeah, it's been tampered with. So you're able to win your first case, but then Ryunosuke's like, did I do the right thing here?
Like, I don't feel like I actually got the truth there.
That seems bad. Doesn't seem like we really did what we came here to do, but I guess we won, so I guess we get to stay. Yay.
Yay.
And then afterwards, McGilda gets murdered in a fire.
Yeah, he's like, oh man, I'm going to go check out the omnibus. I'm going to go see what happened there. And then somebody set it on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes. So he's a crispy McGilda now.
He very much is. So after that, like, it's Ryunosuke kind of like trying to come to terms with like, yo, how do I be a defense lawyer if I don't know if I can believe in my defendants after this case? I'm just real messed up here. But then he has to basically come to the defense of Sosuke Natsume, the Japanese novelist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like just very timid and nervous and thinks he's got ghosts coming after him and everything. But also, he like no one wants to defend him because he's Japanese.
Yep.
So Ryunosuke kind of comes to terms with that and has to be like, okay, I guess I'll do this. But the whole thing about this trial is that like he was walking behind someone who just fell over with a knife in their back, and he just runs away because he's scared. So everyone thinks he just stabbed him or stabbed the person and then ran away.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go through this whole song and dance of the trial and like figure out exactly what happened and everything, which turns out to be a whole thing, which becomes like the crime scene isn't exactly the crime scene.
Yep.
It was across the street, not where everyone thought it was.
And that was because of the beats and the bobbies and not wanting to miss a date.
Mm-hmm. And then also it was an inadvertent accident because of a domestic dispute.
Yep.
Where you meet this landlord and his wife, and they got into an argument about a misinformed information, and the wife starts just like throwing everything at the husband, including a book that was on fire, and then a knife that clings off the window and then just falls straight down and right into the victim's back.
Yep. And she had like leaned down to pick up a book,
Yeah, the flaming book that fell earlier.
Yep.
And also it's interesting because like the wife was one of the jury members.
Yes.
So like you have to like literally bring her down and then like put her on the stand, and everyone's like, "Well, you can't do this." What? And they're like, "Well, I guess yes, we can. We're going to do this anyways."
Yep.
So this kind of like reaffirms Ryunosuke's like belief in the justice system, I guess, and being a defense lawyer because he was able to defend Sosuke and do it in a way that wasn't just like shady or didn't feel right. It was, him actually doing the work and getting the right truth, essentially.
For the record, I just looked it up because I was so it looks like, why am I blanking on the name? Sosuke.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like he left the UK in 1903. January 1903.
So this takes a little bit of liberties with that.
It's close though.
Right, but they don't like mention the turn of the century in this game, so
They mentioned that it's coming up.
right.
So
But he leaves immediately after this case, so
yeah, so it would have been that, like I said, you were saying they took liberties, they did, but it's interesting that they got it pretty close because he was there from 1901 to 1903.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he abandons one of his kitties.
He does. He also wrote a book called I Am a Cat.
Yes, yep.
It's pretty cool.
Smuggled kitties later in the game.
Meow.
Row. It was a nice case, though. I thought it was interesting. And he was saying, I'm really excited to have people who can actually speak my language who are willing to defend me.
Yes. That is true. But yeah, he basically leaves Britain afterwards because he's like, I can't stay here. I gotta go home.
I don't like it.
I gotta go write some books. And then also afterwards, Herlock and Iris are like, hey, you want to come live with us? And they're like, yes, please. We don't have anywhere to stay.
Hotels are so expensive.
They're very expensive.
So you get
Oh
to
my
live in an
goodness.
attic.
They get to be an office attic.
Yeah, so they're at the attic of 221 Baker Street.
Then we get a little bit of a time skip where like 2 months pass and then they haven't done any work.
Yep.
And we get to learn about pawn shops.
Yep.
And then Gina comes back after being in the third case because she's friends with Iris now. Or like Iris has befriended her. I guess that would be the right way to say it.
I think that's a better way to put it,
yes.
yeah. She decided they were friends.
So we get this whole thing where she goes into like the pawn shop and gets this coat, and then this other weird JoJo looking guy comes in and is like, that's my coat. And then there's a whole song and dance with Herlock and Ryunosuke being like, nah, I think you just came in and tried to take that coat. What the heck, dude?
He really is a JoJo character.
He is. And then they invite Gina back for like dinner and everything. And we get this whole thing about Iris's one of Iris's manuscripts because she's the writer of all the Herlock Sholmes books and everything. How one of them's in that pawn shop, but it's there because Herlock doesn't want it to be released yet, and he won't tell Iris why.
Like she showed it to him, and he like freaked out, and he's like, no, I gotta get rid of this.
Also, Suzuto knew what the name of the title was.
Yep.
Which shouldn't be a thing. Again, these are things that are not finished up story-wise in this game.
Yep.
But I'm guessing we will figure that out next time. Around this time as well, they realize, Ryunosuke and Susato realize who Iris's dad is. One Dr. John H. Wilson, who was the victim in the first case of this game. And they're like, uh-oh. So they know that, and they're like, we will tell her eventually, but we're not going to tell her now because I don't think we're ready for that. Again, not something that is wrapped up in this game.
Nope. No, I'm still curious about all that.
And then later in the night, Herlock wakes up Ryunosuke. He's like, hey, there's something weird at the pawn shop. We should go check it out. So they go there. There's like some dudes being real shady. They shoot Turlock, and he makes Ryunosuke go after them, but he loses them very quickly. Then comes back and looks through a peephole in the door for like the storeroom and sees the pawn shop owner shot in the back, and then Gina's next to him with a gun.
Yep.
They're like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
And then basically after that, you have to like convince Gina to let you
Defend
represent her because she's very untrustworthy of people. And then eventually
she doesn't trust people. She's not, I mean, she's untrustworthy in the eyes of people, but she also does not trust others. So.
Yes. So you eventually have to like kind of break her down and get her to do that and everything. Also, you learn that Susato's leaving for Japan because her dad's ill. So she's like, I got to go back. And Ryunosuke's like, oh, that sucks.
He's sad.
He's sad. But you get Iris as your partner in this case specifically.
Yep.
And also, through investigating, you learn that McGilded was the murderer of the bricklayer.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yep. Saw that one coming.
That's not going to come up in this next trial or anything.
Nope.
And essentially, you have to figure out through this trial, like, okay, what exactly happened here?
You're finding out what happened here, and you're also finding out what happened, 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
Yeah.
So you're basically solving 2 cases at once.
Yeah. Well, also like 3 cases.
Yeah, that's true.
Because there's also the secret case of government espionage happening.
That's true, yes.
That they also have to solve inadvertently.
Yep.
So it's like 3 cases in one here, so you get a whole bunch. But I mean, it is the final case of the game, so like it goes very bombastic and everything.
Yeah.
Also, just like ramps up the difficulty because like I felt like going through this whole game, I was like, man, this game's kind of easy.
Yeah.
And then you get to this case, and it's like, all right, now we're ace attorneying.
Yep. Now we're there.
I will not lie. I used a spoiler-free guide for the rest of this case because like I need to get this game finished. So I just did that and cruised my way through the rest of the game.
That's valid.
Or for the rest of that case, I should say.
Yeah, there were a few parts I was like, oh god, I don't really know what to do here. They definitely ramped it up at this one.
Yes. So like you have the 2 baddies, the bruvs.
Governor.
The bruvs.
The bruvs.
Who want to make the detective guy their 3rd bruv.
Yep.
He's like, no, stop that.
Nope.
They do their cool pose.
Yeah, they do.
Which I didn't realize also that the JoJo guy is doing that pose as well.
What?
Yeah, he does it from the side.
Oh my god.
Okay, so spoilers, he's the culprit in this whole thing.
Yeah.
But when you see them in the credits and they're in jail together, they all do the pose together, but he does it from the side while they do show you the back. It's the same pose.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's a good touch.
That's a good touch. I like that. Yeah, but his just looks more like a JoJo pose than theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
So yeah, you bring the JoJo character in who's like a communications officer, and he's like, oh, I don't have any business here. Why would you do this? But it turns out he hired the goons because he needed a music box that was at the pawn shop because it was tied to the McGilded case because he was selling government secrets to McGilded for a lot of money because he used to be very poor and now he has money, but he wants more money, so he's never poor again. And then he ropes his dad into making these music discs that turn out Morse code, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Because his dad used to make music boxes before he made brick.
And he made like a system where like you have to play 2 of them at the same time to get the full message, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And basically he needed like that music box to make sure no one found out about their whole scheme and everything. But then he roped his dad into it, and his dad was like, let me go do the dealing the next time you do this because I know you're doing something weird. And then when he went to do the deal with McGilded murders him. And that spins off that whole thing from 2 months ago and everything.
And then revenge for that has to happen.
So basically, JoJo Man breaks into the pawn shop because he needs those discs. And he needs the box. That's why he breaks in there. And then while they're doing that, the pawn owner comes out because Gina was there as well. Because she wanted to see if the manuscript was there. And then they come in to break in. So there's a whole mess. And while that's all happening, he shoots the pawn shop owner. And he gets shot by the pawn shop owner.
Yep.
And then once Ryunosuke and Herlock show up, the baddies shoot Herlock.
Yep. But he actually gets injured by his concoctions he has.
Mm-hmm. And there's a bullet like stuck in his pouch, which no one knew about. So that introduces the idea of like a third gun, which breaks open the case and everything.
Yep.
And then essentially this, like it said, turns all to this whole government espionage thing where like the detective tried to broker a deal with this dude to get the disc because he was working on this big case of like, we got to make sure no one knows about these government secrets being leaked, even though it was in the paper and everything. So he tries to do that and then tries to cover for him, but it all gets found out essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned the whole thing where like Jojo Manley said, expresses everything, talks about how McGilda did everything, and then he was like, yeah, I'm the one who murdered him after that case because I realized he got off scot-free. So I had to take revenge.
Him.
I burned him alive. And then I had to get those discs because I wanted to make sure no one knew it was me.
Yep.
So that whole thing just turns into a wild ride.
Yeah, it goes places.
Mm-hmm. Was not expecting government secrets being leaked as another part of this case. That was when I was going into it.
Nope. Was not. It was wild.
It's very wild.
It was fun though.
Yes.
And I mean, like you said at the get-go, like definitely some interesting like class commentary here.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this was a good game.
Yes.
And Herlock was a friggin' menace in the final case and after the final case because he's just like, oh, hello, I'm here. I have things for you. Also, I'm just gonna pass out now because I'm still recovering from surgery.
Also, I'm going to like get you this like very fast train so we can get to Dover to see Susato off.
Also, now it's your fault because
now it's your fault.
I said it was you. You needed to see her, so
oops.
Have fun.
Have fun. The big cliffhanger, I guess, for this game though is at the end. Iris talks about how she basically uncovered the Morse code message, but it wasn't in English Morse code. It was in Japanese Morse code.
Yes.
So she's like, yeah. So I kind of did it, but I only know a little bit of this. So here you go. And then Susato reads it and is like, oh, okay. So this is a bunch of names. The first name is like Kazuma's name.
Mm-hmm.
There's a name they don't know. I think there's a third name they don't remember. And then the fourth is a like Jay Wilson.
Yep.
They're like, oh, the third one was the detective.
Oh, right.
So it's Kazuma, unknown name, the detective, and then Jay Wilson.
Yeah.
But that's all they got from that because they didn't play the whole message and everything.
Correct.
So there's some weird intergovernment messaging happening with these names, which we do not know about or why that's happening. Which I'm guessing we will learn next game.
I'm assuming so, yeah.
So yeah, I was surprised just like how much like they kind of just leave you. I just leave up in the air, I should say, from this game to the next. Because like I said, I think like this game came out in 2015. The second game doesn't come out until like 2017.
Oh wow!
So I get like there's no guarantee that they were going to make a sequel. I mean, eventually they did, but
there was no guarantee. If it sold terribly, then it would have been like, well, now you'll never know.
Yeah, so it's a wild approach there. But there you go.
I can say I've started the second game.
I have not started the second game. I did not want to be tainted going into this podcast.
I've started it. But
mostly just because like I finished it right before yesterday when we were originally going to record. I was just like, I'll just wait.
Yeah. Yeah,
Make
that's
sure I don't
fair.
get things confused.
And I'm probably going to have to hold off on playing more of it because there's something else coming out this weekend that I'm interested in. But they pick up straight up answering some of these questions.
Well, that's good.
So that's a really nice thing.
I think you would have to.
You do. You have to. And so like I was pleased that they answer at least something. Not like they don't immediately jump into like, oh, I wonder what this code is at the end, but they jump into something. I was like, okay, I really wanted closure on this, and I'm glad that we're getting some information on it.
Mm-hmm. Also, you learn at the end, Van Zeeks
Yep.
talks about like why he was so like abrasive to Ryunosuke. He's like, I had been betrayed by someone. One day I'll tell you about this.
Yep.
And just like who. So I have a theory about this.
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to be true or not. It's just
hit me. I'm interested in theories.
me trying to put points together.
Mm-hmm.
Kazuma kept talking about how he had to do something in Great Britain.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's related.
Interesting. Who was it that asked, like, straight up, like, did you know what it was? Was it the main, like, lawyer guy, the big honcho with the time? Was that him that just straight up asked, like, do you know what it is that he needed to do?
I think so.
That's what I'm thinking.
Like
too.
when he first shows up there.
Yeah. Because I thought it was interesting that somebody knew, like, oh, hey, what, this is something that I'm interested in. And it's like, why would you be interested in that when it's just like a exchange student?
Right.
So,
some mysteries abound.
Mysteries.
So hopefully we get like just good closure in the second game.
Yeah, I hope so.
Considering they did not make a third. So I don't know if like they'll do anything else like this, or this will just be like the bookend, and there you go. But I'm excited to get into the second game for sure.
Yeah.
And see where things takes us.
This one was really, really good. So the second one's, I'm sure, going to be just as great. And like I said, I really enjoyed that they just kind of like messed with your expectations of what an Ace Attorney game is supposed to be.
Absolutely. Like I think you kind of have to do that.
Yeah. It was clever.
And I think if anyone's going to do that, it's going to be the dude who made the original trilogy. So.
Yep. And also there's a cat door. Can't go wrong with that.
Meow.
I love that. Meow. I love that she just made a cat door in the middle of the Old Bailey.
Yep.
He's like, you can't do that, young lady.
I will make cat doors wherever I want.
You know what? I support her. I do appreciate, just on a side note, I do appreciate that her and Herlock have the very similar like flick and point. It's like, oh man, they're like best friends. It's great.
It's real good.
What a duo. It's very good. I love all the characters in this game.
Good characters.
Very good characters. This is a good game.
It is a good game, yes.
Yay.
I agree.
Yay.
Well, there you go. That is the first great Ace Attorney game. We will eventually be back with the second one at a later date. But yeah, good game.
Good game.
So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. If you would like more from us, head on over to seasonalanimeCheckup.com or sac.cool, so where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like seasonal. Nope, that's this podcast like Jared and Al Watch. There you go.
Yay, nailed it.
You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you'd like more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Anime Checkup. You can buy our books, One Shining Moment, A Critical Analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, and Hot Tubs and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza, get access to unedited versions of the podcast early, and a whole host of bonus episodes as well. Well, next week we'll talk about something else.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay.